We're going to start Daf Vav, but first we have to look at the bottom of Daf Hayim and Beis. The Mishnah says, "Ezu cotton kol sheni yochel lirkov al ksefo shel oviv." So we're talking about bringing the cotton from Yerushalayim to the Harabais. Keep in mind, we're not talking about the trek from wherever they live, Midan Ve'ad Beersheba to Yerushalayim. We're talking about from Yerushalayim to the Harabais. And the child is old enough to be carried piggyback by his father that trip. And that's the opinion of Beit Shammai. So it means that the child is to some extent independent of his mother. And he can separate from his mother for a period of time that it takes to go from Yerushalayim to the Harabais. His father's going to carry him on his shoulders. We're going to see later that it's a very young infant. Beis Hillel are of the opinion that his father will hold him by hand and the child, will walk on his own from Yerushalayim to Harabais. If he can't do so, he's too young to be held by hand and taken by his father from Yerushalayim to Harabais, then he's not included in the Pasuk Sholosh Regolim. Maskif Rab Zera. Here we turn to Daf Vav. I don't get it, says Rab Zera. Ad hochaman asya. Wait a second. He came from Amasog and Dan, up in the north. How did he get to Yerushalayim? You're clearing, well, can his father carry him from Yerushalayim to the Harabais? But how did he get all the way from Dan to Yerushalayim, or from Beersheba north to Yerushalayim? In other words, the distance from his house to Yerushalayim is greater than the distance from Yerushalayim to Harabais. So if he was able to leave his mother behind for, a week's journey, a day's journey, I don't know how long it takes to get from the north, from home to Yerushalayim, then certainly he could be taken by his father that extra lap, that last leg of the trip from Yerushalayim to Harabais. So, why do you have to tell me that it's possible to take him from Yerushalayim to Harabais? Obviously it is, because we took him from all the way to the north down to Yerushalayim. Abaye says to Rabbi Zera, we're talking about a katan who really depends on his mother. You asked me, how did he get to Yerushalayim from the north? And the answer is, ad hocha mechayve ima b'simcha, I to say ime, etc. The mother herself is going to take the child from wherever they live all the way to Yerushalayim. Why? Because she's obligated in the mitzvah of simcha. Even though simcha is a mitzvah seishis my groma, nevertheless, the pasuk says in Dvarim Perek Yudalid, "V'samachta ata u'beisecha," and Chazal say that beisecha is ishtecha. Now, exactly what that means is a machlokas Abai v'Rab Zera Kiddushin Lamed Daled. Abai is of the opinion that she's not obligated in the midst of simcha. It's the husband who's obligated to be samech his wife, where Rab Zera is of the opinion, this is in Rosh Hashanah Daf Vav, that she herself was obligated in the midst of simcha. So how's Abai saying over here, Imei de Mechayve b'simcha? According to Abai, she's not obligated in simcha. It's her husband who's obligated to be samech her. But the answer is that although the obligation is incumbent upon the husband, but he has to be mishadala b'dvarim. He has to try to appease her and convince her to come with him, so that he, the husband, will be able to be mesamech together with his wife and fulfill his obligation of the samachta to beisech. And since he was nisratzeis libala, she agreed to come and be mesamech imo, and she came with him all the way to Yerushalayim, because most women are misratzos. They would like to satisfy the will of their husbands, and especially in a dvar mitzvah. Even though, again, rishus biyada, she had the rishus of not going for the regel to Yerushalayim. Now we have to add another point there to this Gemara, and that's achilas basar shlamim. The mitzvah of simcha is fulfilled. And simcha el b'basar means eating a basar shlamim. So she'll go up to Yerushalayim because you can only eat basar shlamim within Yerushalayim. So the mitzvah of simcha v'samachta tov beisecha will be fulfilled by her. Let's go going to Abzera, for example, by eating shalmei simcha. So therefore, the mother took the child because she couldn't leave the child behind, and she brought the child to Yerushalayim. Is mikan v'elech from Yerushalayim to the Arbayis. Now she gives the child over to his father, because a woman is obligated in the midst of simcha, but she doesn't have the heter to go onto the Harabayis because she doesn't have the midst of re'iyah. Says kol zchurcha. Now we can make sense out of the Shita Beit Shammai. Im yachal lalos v'lechos biyado shel of Yerushalayim la'arbais. The mother brings the child, the infant, to Yerushalayim. Now she hands over, so to speak, the child to her husband, and the husband now has to either, according to one sheet that's Beit Shammai, put him on his shoulders and take him to Harbayis, or according to the other opinion, lechos biyada, that he can hold his hand and lead him to the Harbayis. And in such a case, chayav, you're obligated, the father is obligated to bring the child up to the Harbayis, being low. If he cannot successfully the ola with the child go up with his father is potter. The father is potter. He doesn't have to bring his child up because the child is not independent. Eshiv Rebbe Tachas Beis Hill. Rebbe, in a sense, represents Beis Hill to ask a kasha on Beit Shammai. And there are a number of different girsos. Our text says Rebbe. There's another text that says Abaye. There's a third text that has Rabbi Zera. Again, there are many different girsos. But let's take our girsa. Heshiv Rebbe. Rebbe now is going to contend against Divrei Beit Shammai, against the words of Beit Shammai, who would say that the katan is potter from Re'iyah. If it's Eino Yachal Lirkov al Kseifav Shel Aviv, if he cannot be carried piggyback by his father from Yerushalayim to Arbayis, and now Rebbe is going to contradict Beit Shammai based on Chan. So let's give a little introduction here. Chana is the mother of Shmuel HaNavi, and Elkanah, her husband, was on his way. He was about to pack his bags for Aliyah L'Regel with his entire household. And the pasuk says that Chana lo also. This was right, shortly after Shmuel was born. Let's say he was 1 year old. And she turned down the offer to join her husband Elkanah on his trek to Yerushalayim for the regel. She said to her husband, I will bring him up. Well, I said Yerushalayim, but it's really Shiloh. And anyway, I'll bring him for the Aliyah L'Regel together with you, my husband, but only after the child is weaned, Chagiga, which means he's 2 years old. So we don't understand Beit Shammai. Shmuel, the Yachol Lirkov al Ksefo Shel Aviv. Shmuel could have sat piggyback on the shoulders of Elkanah. And even a katan who's 1 year old can be taken piggyback by his father to bring him from Yerushalayim to the Harabayis. And not only that, here we're not even talking about Yerushalayim, we're going only as far as Shiloh is concerned. So Elkanah could have carried Shmuel as a 1 year old baby, piggyback from wherever they lived to Shiloh. So why did Chana say that she's only going to bring him when he becomes 2 years old. At the year of 1 year old, even before his second birthday, he's capable of sitting on his father's shoulders and being taken piggyback from Yerushalayim to the Arabayas. So how could Chana, the great Tzaddikas Chana, say, I'm not going to bring him to Yerushalayim or to Shiloh in this case until he's 2 years old after Chagiga and not? This is a kash on Beit Shammai. Now I'm trying to think. According to Beis Hillel, he has to be old enough that you can take him by his hand. So I'm not exactly sure, according to Beis Hillel, why Chana said that Achi Gomel Hanar, or Hanar. To Beis Hillel. I get the sense that she meant A plus B, meaning when he's weaned and he's 2, plus a little bit more than that when he's able to walk side by side, hand in hand by his. Now, we're going to try to answer this question of Rebbe and Amalei Avua, which is Rabbi Gamliel. Just 1 second. Here. Rav Shimon Gamliel, sorry. So Rebbe's father is Rav Shimon Gamliel. Again, that's according to our Girsa, that it was Rebbe who was the one who raised this objection to Beit Shammai, against Beit Shammai. According to the other Girsos, if it's Abaye, so Abaye is not a contemporary of Rebbe, so it's impossible to say that we're talking about Abaye who's going to now, in a sense, counter against the argument that was put forth by Rebbe. Ulitamech. So now, whoever it is, not sure if it's Abaye or if it's Rebbe or Rav Shimon Gamliel, the father of Rebbe, says, wait a minute. And according to you, Beis Hillel, you understand Chana? I don't understand Chana. Tikshe lach gufa. Chana gufa. Milo machayfa. We said that a woman is obligated with mitzvah simcha. Simcha sarega. So why didn't she come? What was she saying? That she's exempt from the mitzvah of simcha? Hello, we have no choice, but she realized that Shmuel was very soft and sensitive in the makeup of his body. In the Hebrew, they call it me'unag v'chalush b'yoter. So he was very weak, and Chasha, she was afraid, with regard to Shmuel, l'chul shel that he'll get very weak because of the trek, the journey, and he might get sick from it. And therefore, she herself would not go on Aliyah to the regel because she was taking care of the baby of Shmuel. So 1 second, does that answer also the question against base? According to Beit Shammai, why did she wait till he was 2 years old when he could be taken piggyback at the age of 1? So I guess because of his very young age, we've now established that Shmuel, he was Me'unog and Chalush, so there was a sakana that maybe we would expose him to the Choli Ader. Ulshas Ader. Boy, Rabbi Shimon Katan Chige, L'divrei Beit Shammai, or Suma L'divrei Shnei. What's happening now is we have to take the child for the mitzvah of Re'iyah when he's old enough because of Inuch. But what happens if this Katan is in a physical state where even if he would have been a gadol, he would still not be obligated in the mitzvah re'iyah. Why? Because he's a chiger. And a chiger who's lame is potter for the mitzvah re'iyah. So how could it be that, let's say, according to Beit Shammai, right, a cotton yochel lirkov al kisvei oviv, you could take a piggyback, his father is obligated to mechanech him in re'iyah. Would that apply if the cotton himself, had he been a gadol, would be potter from re'iyah because he's a chiger or a summa? And the question of summa can be asked even according to Beis Hillel. Mao, what's the din of a katan summa? Because a summa, as we said, even be'echem einov, is potter from re'iyah. So this is the question of chinuch. What is chinuch? Is chinuch a separate, independent entity? Let the cotton do the mitzvah, or no? Chinuch is preparation for what he'll do when he's a gadol. So the Gemara says, no. If you're talking about a lame person and it's irreversible, unfortunately he's going to remain lame, or suma sheni yochel is pateach, or his eyesight will never return, is then this whole suffix where you approached it is completely ridiculous. Because hash the gadol potter is katli boy. There's no such thing as being mechayev chinuch for a katan in order to be margil him with mitzvahs, if when he's going to be a gadol, he's not even chayev them. So where's the preparation? La hargilo b'mitzvahs. Lo tzricha, but rather we're talking about a case, and that's from Shimon Safek, of chiger sheyachal lispashet. Now I'm not sure in the Gemara itself it says yachal lispashet, but here in the translation he says asid hu lelech al raglav kodem sheyagdu. It sounds like he's very sure about it. I don't even know in modern medicine, could they actually tell? Yeah, I guess they could. They know from experience that children who have a certain kind of, let's say, a deformity in their feet, it'll straighten out in a matter of time. So I guess there are statistics and they can predict that by the time he's bar mitzvah, he'll be chayiv in the mitzvah. But this case, I don't know, summa, you know anything about this? Yachlis patet, you could already predict that they say that I think babies are blinded, no? Or something like that. Or limited vision, right? And the vision improves with time. But here we're talking about it. It sounds like we're talking about a 2-year-old who can't see, but yet we know he will see. So now we appreciate the suffix of Rabbi Shimon, because should we be mechanichim beria when at this moment in time, had he been a gadol in this particular state of physicality, he would not be chayiv in the mitzvah? Or do we say no, that we're chayiv in the mitzvah of chinuch vis-a-vis this child because we already anticipate what's going to be by the time he's bar mitzvah, and he will be obligated the mitzvah for Iyah when he's bar mitzvah. Abaye answers this question. He says, "Kol hecha the gadol mechayev midaraisa, kat nami mechanchet le midarabbanan, but kol hecha the gadol potter midaraisa is midarabbanan katanami potter." So if right now we say Basharu Sham, he is in a situation where he would not be chayev as a gadol, then he's potter. The father does not have to give him be mechanichim. Now, if not for the fact that we're limited in time, there's a whole beautiful pilpul on this. Okay, we go back to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah says that for Re'iyah, you must spend at least a shlitch of a dinar, because a dinar equals 6 more kesef. So 1/3 of a dinar is 2 mos kesef, but in the case of Chagigas, Beit Shammai, it's more kesef, which is basically just half of what he has to spend for olas per year. So we're comparing now a korban olah with a korban shlamim. And Beit Shammai gives precedence to the korban olah. You have to spend twice the amount for the korban olah. They still say just the opposite. Re'iyah ma, chagiga shtei kesef. So you're going to spend double the amount on the Chalmei Chagiga that you spend on the Olas Re'iyah. So we understand Beit Shammai, Re'iyah Ola Kula L'Gavoa. I turn up on a Beit Shammai Omer Re'iyah Shtei Kesef V'Chagiga Ma Kesef. Why? Because Re'iyah Ola Kula L'Gavoa, right? There's no Achilas Adam, there's only Achilas Mizbeach, Masechet Chagiga, which is the Karban Shlamim, and there'll be a Murim that are burnt on the Mizbeach, but there are major sections that are given to the Kohanim and to the Bailan. And that gives the Ola much more Chashivas, because the entire body of the Ola is burnt on the Mizbeach, is given to Achilas Mizbeach. And furthermore, let's take a look at the Korbanos of Chag HaShavuos. In regard to the Korban Ola of Shavuos, which was an accompaniment to the Shtei Lechem, the Torah says, Yikach Gimel, She'aviu Shiva Kvasim, Par Echad Ushnei Elim. And in Shlomim, which again accompany the Atzeres with the Shtei Lechem, it's only 2 kvasim. So here it's 7 kvasim for the Ola and 2 kvasim for the Shlomim. So we see clearly that we have to be more machmer for the value of the Ola than the Shlomim, the Olas Re'iyah, rather than the Chalmei Chagiga. Beisil Omrim, Re'iyah Ma Kesef, Chagiga Shtei Kesef. The Chagiga gets twice the amount. Why? The Chagiga Yeshna Lifnei Hadibur. Even before Matan Torah at Har Sinai, Klal Yisrael already were makriv the Karban Shlomim. And this is a pasuk at the end of Mishpatim. Okay, I don't see it right now, but anyway, they were makriv Shlomim. This Gemara is a bell because it says they were makriv Olos as well. I don't know. In any event, Masha'en came Bere'iyah, the Hakrava of the Karban Re'iyah was only after Matan Torah. So Shlomo has a Chashibus above and beyond Ola because it was Kadmu Li Ola. V'odin furthermore, Matzinu B'Nisiyim Sheribo Be'em HaKasu B'Shlomim Yosim Ba'olos. So in the parasha of the Nisiyim in Bamidbar Zion, the Olos were 12 parim, 12 elim, 12 kvasim. The Shlomim were twice the amount, 24 parim, Shishim elim, 60 elim. That's almost 6 times the amount of elim. Shishim atudim, and the atudim weren't even, these are mature goats, they weren't even brought b'chlal as olos. And then you have Shishim Kvasim as opposed to Shneimesar Kvasim. So we see that they were makriv many, many more Shlomim than Olos. And it means, therefore, that Shlomim are more choshev than the Olah. And therefore, it's logical that we should require that you spend twice the amount on buying a Shlomim than you would on the Olah. That's Beit Shammai, that's Beit Hillel. So Gemara says, Beit Hillel, my time alo Amri ke Beit Shammai, which is a very odd question because Beit Hillel just presented 2 major arguments to support the super duper superseding chashivas of the Shlomim. So what do you mean my time Amri ke Beit Shammai? So the answer is from the Netziv Mival Lajin that the Gemara is asking, since Olas Re'iyah also has a mile, that it's completely burnt on his back. So it's in the balance of it, it should all equal out. Why are you giving such preference to the Shlomim? And the Gemara answers, Dika Amrit, what is the argument based Shammai? That Re'iyah Adifa, why? To Ola Kula Gavoa, Adarabba Chagiga Adifa, this page the Achilus. In the case of Shlomim, there's an overlap of 2 Achilus. There's the Achilas Mizbeach, which is the Emurim, and so forth and so on. And then there's part of the Shlomim that's Nechal Abaylim. So I would rather give preference to Shlomim that has a double Kiyum, a 2-fold Achilah, as opposed to Ola, which only has a 1 single monolithic Achilah. Udekarmet Neluf Me'atzeres. What are you talking about? Atzeres the Karban Tzibur. We're talking about Olas Re'iyah. We're talking about his own personal Chagiga. is done in carbon yachid, be carbon yachid, ain't done in carbon yachid, be carbon tzibur. So the shlamim on Atzeres are karbanos tzibur. Actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the only carbon shlamim that's a carbon tzibur, I think. Anyway, so it comes to the Trumas HaLishka, and you can't derive any conclusions from that special upgraded status of the shlamim on Chag HaShvuot to Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga, which are karbanos yachid. And the karbanos hanasiyim, which we proved again that the shlamim is greater than the olas, that's a karban yachid. So therefore, Beis Hillel would rather prove that Shalmei Chagiga are superior to Olas Re'iyah because of the comparison and the analogy to the olos and the shlamim of the Nisiyah, because it's all karbanos tzibur. Beis Hillel, Shammai my time lo amri ke Beis Hillel. Why did Beit Shammai reject Beis Hillel? And again, we have to ask the same question. I mean, what do you mean? Why? They gave their reasons for it. But once again, there's a two achilos in the case of Shlomo. So he says, "Duka Amar Chagiga Div Yeshno Fnei Adibur, Riyonami Yeshno Fnei Adibur." The pasuk says at the end of Mishpatim, it says Vayalu Olos. I don't understand Beis Hillel. I'm missing. But anyway, Uda Karmet Neiluf Minasiyim Danin Davar Hanoik Lidoros Midavar Hanoik Lidoros. So if we want to compare Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga, we should compare them that Noeg in Lidoros to Shalmei Atzeres, which are Noeg in Lidoros. But ain't done in Davar Hanoik Lidoros Midavar Shein Noeg Lidoros. You're talking about the Karbanos and the Siyah, that was a one-shot deal, only once in history. And therefore, it doesn't make any sense to derive conclusions about comparing Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga from something that's not Noeg L'Doros, like Karbanos and the Siyah. Ubeis Hillel Ma'ishna Chagiga the Yeshna L'fnei Adibur. You're telling me that only Chagiga was before the Dibur? T'chsiv, before Maimon Har Sinai, when Moshe built the Mizbeach and he sent Nari B'nai Yisrael to Makru Karbanos, it says Vayizbechu Tzvachim Shlomim. So you see that they were Makru Shlomim before Matan Torah. So let's ask the following question: Re'iyah Nami Tichsiv Vayalu Olos. Okay, this was our question. So we finally got to the point where the Gemara raised that question. Olos were also brought before the Dibur at the end of Parshas Mishpat. My answer is because Sabri Beis Hillel, Olas Shekriva Yisrael B'Midbar Olas Talmid Havi. You're making a mistake here. You're combining apples and oranges. The Olos of which the Torah is speaking about are not the Olos Re'iyah, rather they're Olos Talmid, which is a chova on a daily basis to bring the Olos Talmid. And we don't derive conclusions from a daily carbon to a carbon that's Misman Lizman. Shalmei Chagiga and Olas Re'iyah are only during certain times of the year. My Savri, Olas Shekriva Yisrael B'Midbar, Olas Re'iyah Havi. The pasuk says, Vayechezu es ha'elokim. So the Olas Re'iyah was before the Dibur. So it wasn't the Olas Talmid here, it was the Olas Re'iyah. By the way, this touches on the famous machlokas that Ein Mukta Mucha B'Torah. Rashi says Ein Mukta Mucha B'Torah. Amar Abai Beit Shammai Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yishmael Kulu Svirlu Ola Shekriva Yisrael B'Midbar Olas Re'iyah. Ubeis Hillel Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Yosef Aglilu Kulu Svirle Ola Shekriva Yisrael B'Midbar Olas Talmid Havi. So the Gemara is going to go through all these Tanoim to line them up on two sides of two columns. Beit Shammai, Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Yishmael all belong to the column that define Ola in Parshas Mishpatim as Olas Re'iyah. And on the other side of the equation is Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yosef Agli. They all agree that the Ola in the Midbar was Olas Hatam. And Beit Shammai are Damara. I mean, that's what we learned all along. That Beit Shammai say that the Karbanos Ola that were brought then were Olas Re'iyah. And Rabbi Shmuel, this side Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Klolos Nemru B'Sinai, Upratos biol moed. Okay, so this we'll have to pick up tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Tuesday, correct? Okay, so we're up to Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, then? So that's where we're holding. And Amir Hashem will pick that up tomorrow.